child I know, they're take many upper level type of classes, but in calculus, they can't go at the same pace as AP calculus. So it's okay to say in this area, that's not where I'm going to go at a rigorous pace because I need to slow it down to be able to learn the concepts or understand this more thoroughly. But in these areas, so I'm hearing in this model that you're saying this somewhat does this, but also what I was trying to say with Ken is that it's so I also do think there's not kids that every kid has their own strengths and weaknesses just like I do.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why differentiation has to happen no matter what class you're in, no matter what structure you're in. But it's more giving them the chance to not put themselves in that box before they know their skills and their strengths and their abilities. And at middle school age, they're not sure. Sometimes they make a choice because it's what their friend chose. Sometimes they make a choice because they have extra basketball practice, and so I'm going to choose the easier route, and they may miss an opportunity to find a passion and love and a strength that they've kind of eliminated. So that.
Is it safe to say that perhaps the first two theories of action that have been shared, their benefits perhaps are that they don't institutionalize in the structure of the courses that we offer some of those ingrained narratives that kids then create about themselves because they're either in the gen ed or they've been challenged, they're in the so they can be in an environment where they can be coached and supported to move and move back, perhaps, without sort of that institutional overlay of the gen ed challenge and the AAP. Is that a fair statement?
So I'm making eye contact. I think what that helps to say is, so you're trying to get these product attributes, and so this model avoids this thing. So cars use up gasoline, kills dinosaurs, pollutes environment. This model avoids killing, doing that. It's an electric car. So what's cool about it, this product feature that's cool about it, is it doesn't label them. It allows them to move back and forth. That's what I'm not seeing in here's how it works, and it's good because.
So that's what you need for the
That's what I need to see for all of us. I'm not seeing, and you guys have been in it. I've been through the process that you are. We're out actually looking at your widget you tried to design, and I'm saying, okay, I'm not quite getting it here. You say, oh, it does. Finally, we get, oh, that's what it does. Awesome.
Well, I'll tell you,
I love that.
with these perspective, it was as much keeping opinion, it was being as objective as possible. It wasn't a sales deal, I guess,
But I'm
it wasn't.
looking for the unique features.
Okay.
And it's designed well. That's what the theory action. If we did this perfect, and we never do anything perfect. So if we do it perfect and it has some good attributes, then it's worth trying.
I think one thing that hasn't been discussed that is pretty important in my opinion is the equity of access and the barriers that currently exist in our school district. And we took a long look at data about participation in these self-select challenge classes, and it is really skewed towards, white, Asian, wealthier families.
So
And I just think that, and kids who are not in special ed, and right,
So, yeah, so let's try to work.
well, I guess my point was to say what Ken was asking
Yeah.
about was what are the selling points, and I'm saying equity is equity of access.
So equity was one of the considerations we looked at through all of the theories of action.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about time, Larry.
but I have
time.
a quick, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
You presented this, right, Lori? I wanted to know when you were going through this, was it you and Lynn that did it?
Well, there was actually 5 or 6 because they
Okay.
joined
We
groups.
started
There
out
were
with
8 of
3
us.
and
Okay.
then added another group.
And they haven't been vetted, remember, this was just each group taking a
Right, I was there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, because you were presenting it, what do you think of this model?
What I personally think of this model?
Well, just what do you think of it?
Yeah, that wasn't where we were going to go.
Right.
Really what
Oh,
we
okay, I
wanted
wasn't
to do.
asking that, I just thought, what do you think of it as far as the positive And are we not
Oh,
there yet?
Well, they came up with, the theory of action was, if we do this model, this is what would need to occur. So they've listed those things that they
Okay.
came up with as far as, in their best work, there were 6 of you, right? 6 or so, 6 or 8. This is what they wrote as far as, if we think about this model, this is just our first cut, our first glimpse of what we would need to think about.
Okay.
We put aside our own, what our
Yeah,
own
oh, yeah.
beliefs
all of
were
it,
and trying to come together with
Okay.
because we all have our own place where we're
I
coming
see.
from.
And how does this model serve all students, this particular model?
Lynn, you want to speak?
I was gonna, it's just like the other one, it gives, every single kid has their access point. Everybody has the opportunity to meet the curriculum where they are, and everybody has the opportunity to move forward with this particular model.
So if I go, I'm just trying to visualize again, if I go in access point here, let's say, and then I decide I want to take a risk in the middle of being here, like I'm in the middle of a project, or does it have to end? I just don't get how you bring closure. That's what I think we need a better visual of.
So last year I taught Challenge, and I had high cap students in there, it was a cluster class. And so what I did, I knew that I had to differentiate, and I also taught a Gen Ed 8th grade class. So it was great because I was teaching from Gen Ed to high cap. And so I was trying to figure out, what does that really look like when I'm differentiating using this brand new curriculum? And so what I did is I had kind of a basic line, like just meeting standard line that I taught to my Gen Ed kids, because I was just trying to figure out how this works. I'm not from teaching in these level classes was brand new to me. I've always taught all kids in one room, from special ed to honors, all in one classroom. So sorting kids out was new for me. So I was trying to figure this out. So my 8th grade Gen Ed kids, they got kind of this basic curriculum from Springboard. It wasn't very enriching. It was just kind of like meeting standard every time. Wasn't necessarily pushing them as high as they could go, right? Because they were in Gen Ed and they had this like, I'm not smart. I didn't pick Challenge. I'm in Gen Ed, so I don't like to do homework. We shouldn't have to do this. I shouldn't have to do that. Oh, that's too hard, right? So I was dealing with that. In my next class, so that's kind of the basics. We're just meeting like standard, we call it a 3, meeting standard, that would be a 3. In my challenge classes, I was always pushing them towards the 4s because I wanted them to be, constantly reaching above, because they chose to be in challenge, so I wanted them to constantly be challenged. So I did a lot of enriching kind of activities with the same curriculum. Then we have the cluster kids that came up on top of that. So what I did is I created what I called an extra challenge, because I didn't know what else to call it. So I created an extra challenge where my high cap kids had to do it because that was meeting their learning goals. And then any challenge kids could opt in. So I would have, whatever the assignment was, and it wasn't every single day. Sometimes it was in one particular day. It was like, okay, for an extra challenge, do this. And it would take whatever it is that we're learning to the next level. Okay, that was an extra challenge, and anybody could do it. But my high cap kids had to do it. Then, and other times it would be like, we're gonna write an argumentative essay, and the extra challenge is to do this, side research project, so that you're writing everybody's writing an argumentative essay, but my Gen Ed kids would use the articles out of the book, so they weren't having to research, they were just learning how to pull quotes from the book in order to incorporate them into their essay. The challenge kids they couldn't use any of the book resources, they had to go and research their own things. And then, I don't remember what the extra challenge was, I think it was I gave them a topic. They didn't get to self-select their topic, so it was within a certain set of topics or something. So they didn't get to pick something they were necessarily interested in, but I gave them something different. I can't remember what it was last year. So that was kind of a way that I constantly was challenging everybody at all times. Well, then what I did is I took those, then I felt bad for my Gen Ed kids because they really got this really boring, horrific class period. I felt like, because I saw the cool things that we were doing in Challenge, and so what I did is I just brought it down, and I just asked the kids that just told kids same thing that I told my Challenge kids, you can opt into any of these, challenge assignments that you want. And they were able to get some of those fun eccentric things, and sometimes kids opted in, and sometimes kids didn't opt in, and same thing in extras, in Challenge. Some kids opted up, and some kids didn't, and they just kind of met with and I would say, take a look at what your life, this project is a 2-week project. What does your life look like in the next 2 weeks? Can you dedicate some extra time and resources to this? And if you can, then this might be a good time. If not, then get the next one. So that's, I don't know if that's helpful or
Yeah,
not.
no, go ahead.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, move on. Number 4.
So number 4 is more or less status quo, recognizing right now we don't have 6th graders, so we would develop something for 6th grade like we currently have for 7th and 8th grade, but otherwise kind of maintain status quo. Some things that we saw out of this, the continuum services will be available to students to choose separate courses in core academic areas, so they can, like they do now, they can choose challenge or regular. This will allow students and parents to maintain choice as they kind of approach registration time, which is this time of year. Students can choose to take academic risk and challenge classes without worrying about impact on high school GPA, so they can, I don't want to say these are like AP or IB classes, but they can say, oh, I'm going to take something more challenging now, and I don't have to worry about what it's going to look like when I'm applying for colleges. And then the other is some students may not take academic risks, and this may impact their readiness, confidence, and willingness to take AP or IB college in the high school. So when they get to high school, I've never taken a challenge class, how could I take an AP class or an IB class or something? So those were the kind of things. And Leslie's got some.
So some of the, what do we need to do differently or considerations to maintain status quo is to continue to seek to provide a public education available to all students on equal terms. Continue to identify barriers currently keeping students of all groups, looking at race, gender, socioeconomic status, disability, color, national origin, from registering for challenge classes in proportion to their numbers within the general school population. Provide additional financial resources for closing the achievement gap, and academic support classes to assist struggling students enrolled in classes with high numbers of underrepresented populations, and continue to work to meet contractual obligations around class composition. This class composition is continuing to be an area that continually brainstorming. It's also a challenge model. So those are the overall pieces. We did break out parents in elementary schools, secondary keys, but we're going to leave it to questions to kind of review.
Can you clarify, I don't know, wasn't tracking with what you meant by class composition?
So we have, for example, like Obi has half of his courses of challenge options. It reduces the number of general education sections. So that only leaves that number of sections to divide your SPED students and some of your ELL students in there. So they're going into those sections in extremely high concentrations because you've got such a large portion of kids in that number of challenge sections. And so we have contractual obligations around the percentage of your classes, and there's some pretty high percents. Obi, can you talk about an example that you know?
So I don't have to give you an exact percent. Our special ed population in our schools is roughly 10 to 12% is roughly where it runs. So many of those kids that we've seen don't take a challenge class. So I can think of particularly about a 9th grade science teacher who has a regular 9th grade science class, and she has like 26 kids in that class, and of those 26 kids, 11 of them are in special ed. So that's much higher than the percentage population that you would see in the school as a whole. And so there are things that we do to mitigate that to support the teacher. In this particular teacher's class, for example, she has some paraeducators in there that help her kind of reach the special ed population.
And I know at Skyview we've got a number of classes where out of 31, I've got 12 to 14 special ed or ELL students in there. And currently with our pair support, the numbers are so high in multiple sections supporting them. Something to consider for us, what we would need to do to operate in that model.
What was the percentage that weren't taking challenge, even one challenge class? I don't have that document in front of me. I know it was only 10% were taking all 4 classes.
I don't believe I have that done.
And I don't remember what percentage were taking 0 challenge. 40?
40%.
Out of across the district?
Okay.
It's high.
40% are taking 0. 10% take your 4, and then the other 50% are taking 1, 2, or 3.
Yes.
If I can do math. So I'll take do math fast.
Yep.
So one thing I've heard is that the kids that are taking the 4 and the kids that are taking the 0 tend to get more, if you will, on a track. But the kids that take 1, 2, or 3 are getting integrated into all the classes.
Master scheduling is pretty complex, so there's a lot of things that drive master schedules. The first thing that tends to drive them are singleton classes, and then,
What do you mean by that?
so a singleton class would be, I only offer 1 class. So for example, I only offer 1 video productions class. So when where I put my video productions class in the day, if I have let's say I have a science class next to it, none of those kids in video productions will be in science class.
Band, orchestra,
Right, the
choir,
next
any
big
of those
drivers
singletons
are-
that we run.
Drama.
So it
And
goes,
art one.
yeah.
World language in middle school.
So is this more, is part of the reason why kids get kind of locked into their section is part of a scheduling issue?
The more restrictive your schedule is, right? So if you're taking
Right.
band and you're also taking, for Leota, we have Challenge Spanish, you're also taking Challenge Spanish 300 because they come up from the dual language. Suddenly your schedule gets pretty restrictive and there's
Mhm.
only one way you can go. And if I have, say, 15 kids that are doing the same thing, they're in band and Challenge Spanish 300, those 15 kids are driven pretty much the rest of their day on a very similar track.
Is there a way to adjust that? I mean, is there any way to make?
Not in a
I don't
know.
specific example like you just gave.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're gonna have some kids, it sounds like that could happen even in this other.
Right, the more layers you have, so now I have regular, I have regular language arts, I have challenge language arts, and at Leota we have AAP language arts. So those 3 create, can have the opportunity to create separate tracks, particularly when then you layer in orchestra or band and these other things. So the 2 ways to eliminate them, not overly practical. One would be, okay, we'll just run class sizes at 10, and then we can put kids everywhere, but suddenly we can't, I mean, that's not a practical solution. Another,
Let's make it happen. Everybody here happy.
the other thing is
They'll be happy.
cutaway options, right? So in here, we're having to be talking about challenge, but let's say we say, okay, the only elective I'm going to offer is band at my school, and that's the only elective. And so all kids have to take band. Suddenly, it doesn't create all these other, it eliminates the opportunity to take STEM and art and all these other things, but from a tracking standpoint, it eliminates the tracking of the kids. So those are the 2. So in neither one of those ways are
1
really
and 2
practical.
make,
Less of that.
4 makes your scheduling harder.
Yes.
There's
yes.
also a big school, large school difference too. If you're in a smaller school of 620 and you have fewer sections to play with, and then it's more difficult than a larger school like Skyview, who has more sections within their day. I think of Kenmore Junior High and music, and the students, it's such a high music interest that they have 100 kids in that music class that period, that really if they take a certain number of classes they're all in, they just move together during the day, many of them do.
Let me just ask a question maybe about this model, and then something that Bridget brought up about how we've seen kind of the classes become kind of just disproportionate of the district as a whole, student population as a whole. Is there any thought that with this kind of an approach that we would have maybe a criteria that the class is offered if it reflects the challenged volunteer student enrollment that reflects the diversity of that school, and if we don't hit that minimum, then that class is just not going to be offered for that semester?
Kids, we're not choosing, that would penalize kids, we're not even talking about parent pace yet, that's another thing that's not even being, we can worry about all of that, but then we're also not worried about the individual kids in Pearson pace and community. And so, I don't think penalizing the kids by taking a class away because not enough signed up is really fair.
Another way to look at it, again, this isn't something we flushed out, so just another way to look at it is make it a opt-out as opposed to opt-in. So all kids take this, and then they opt out if they're not ready for the challenge or the rigor. Right now it's opt-in, and so potentially, again, I have to flush it out, but potentially that could eliminate some of that, because if you meet whatever these criteria are, suddenly you're put into this class. It doesn't, and the criteria obviously is not going to be socioeconomic, it's not going to be based on diversity, it's going to be based on some academic things that have been identified, rather than waiting for somebody to come advocate for you to get you in that class, or somebody to say, yeah, you can do this. You're just, every kid gets in it. So that might, I don't know, I mean, it would be something.
They, in the Save Our Challenge, and one of the things that they put in there is that every kid that had a 3-4 on the, what's the new test that we're doing now? That you automatically enroll them.
But don't our free and reduced lunch kids still have a decent SBAC?
I mean, again, I didn't flesh any of that out there, that was just one of the,
I think we'll also find kiddos who, middle school, whatever, doesn't count. So we've got some teachers who'll say that they've got kids who have great ability, great ideas, motivated, can do it, and they didn't do well on that smarter balance. They chose not to do it.
We look for multiple measures when we're identifying kids, and this would be a single measure. And it's a new test, really needs a few years before it has some reliability to it.
can we encourage, you know, I'm just wondering, it sounds to me like maybe it's more a problem of we're not getting kids in that are, there's less free reduced lunch and minority children going into, it's getting late, going into the challenge courses. And so how do we increase these children taking the challenge courses in this model of number 3 or number 4? How do we change that? How do we impact that? And I know you guys haven't flushed this out yet, but that would be something that I would want to know, is what are ways, is it that, you know, the school board has a goal of having students take 2 or more AP classes in high school. Do we require that kids take at least 1 challenge class if we were to keep this model? Or like Obadiah said, that they would opt, you know, they have to choose 1 and then they'd have to have some type of reasoning why they come in and at least take 1.
I also think at middle school that we've done a lot of talking about communities and how important that is. And how are we going to build in structures to have an inclusive school community? So we don't hear, you know, I can't, or I'm not, we need to celebrate differences and recognize all ability as a piece. So what structures are we going to continue? Because I think it's a piece that we just can improve on as we've looked at this model. It just needs to be a continued component of how we're building that in schools and in the middle school model to build inclusive when if we have this wide array of tracking or options.
So I feel like we're selling this one when we want the other, so I'm just wondering what are the, I mean, I hear that, but I'm wondering how can we, like, being inclusive to all the students, but I even see in the elementary schools that the kids don't feel included within their own classroom because of being in different, so I think it's something that.
That's an inclusive middle school is a goal of all principals and teachers and staff, no matter what model we have.
Right.
That's going to be a goal, that's a commitment, that's a part of creating a culture and a community in the school. That will be the vision that all principals will have along with their staffs. They've been working on what does a middle school model look like, social emotional needs for months around that. So that will be a common theme.
Which is awesome.
So I don't know if there's any more questions on number 4, but I want to go back to the questions what additional information would you like prior to making a decision at the board level? We're planning to write your recommendations of theory of action. You gave us some ideas. We might need more. Whatever else you have to add to that as far as the considerations. I heard Amy, you mentioned about the considerations.
Yeah, just kind of
fleshing
giving
those out.
pros and cons
Right.
for each.
Right,
Yeah.
weighing that out. We're planning to forward 1 option. Does that work? Yes or no? So we'd love feedback on all of those things and anything else. So they're getting ready to move it forward. And so what do you like? What would the board like to see?
I was going back to what I was saying really quick here is, that goes along with this, is I would like to hear in option 4, how would we encourage I'm hearing these are the problems, now I want to know with this, model, if we keep it, how do we encourage free reduced lunch, minority students to take classes that are challenged? And how do we encourage them to take risks within that framework? Because I agree with you on the risk taking and that all that is, you know, they're junior hires. So how do we encourage them to take those risks? And how do we change that culture if we stay with this model? And I think those would be good things that I would like to hear back if this is the model to have.
Would that be true of all models? Because this was just trying to share
Sure.
the three models, and I was,
But this one, I think, didn't say some of those things like kids will take risks as what were the students.
so if this comes back as B1, so the question is, so is there one model to come back to y'all, or do you want to see
Yeah, what do you
three?
want?
I mean, what is it?
When you, yeah. what
Because
would you
that
like?
could be true for any of the models, right? Because I heard Ken say critical paths and the failure points or paths.
Yeah, I think pushing to that, of the 4 questions or the 3 questions, I can answer the third one, which is I don't want just one model.
And neither do
Because,
I.
because I think what's happening is, I mean, I think we're trying to design this thing and there's mix and match. This has been amazingly useful for me to get a better understanding of some of what I think are the awesome points. Like, I'm so excited about this thing, if we can get this thing. Yeah, I am too. I also am getting a better idea of some of the what are the current pain points that you think or hope, and these are hopes in some sense, you hope that these models could do away with, okay? And so I'm attracted to high returns, and I'm attracted to making bad things go away, okay? And oftentimes though, when we plan, we say, oh, well, we'll do this, and we'll make this bad thing go away, and we'll get this new great thing. It's on this axis, okay? But there's usually the other side is when you change something, you lose something. What is it that you're losing from this model? And then even though this thing has this great new thing, it also oftentimes brings in something next. So I'm really looking for all the trade-offs of all the models. So I don't want one option, and I think, at least me, I'm gonna wanna see it again and mix and match a little bit, do my gray animals. The other thing, the information I want to see it in action. I want to come watch some of you teach, because I'm really impressed with the way you're communicating this, and I need to see it and feel it. And I think we have our community here, and they have, I think, some of the same concerns that I have. And until, I'm going to be from Missouri, show me it working, and that's going to move me towards being able to be excited about it, because I love the idea of getting rid of bad stuff and adding good stuff. Okay, more good stuff, less bad stuff. I'm there with you, but the additional information, I need to see it in action before I'm going to be comfortable with a massive change to the system. And then planning to write the recommended theory of action. For me, I want a pretty detailed program plan. This is a program design. And so. You know, I taught at the Evans School. I'm used to, for something on this scale, I mean, I'm thinking 100, 200 pages. I mean, I literally am of all, here's what the parents are, here's the things, here's the budget, here's the mechanisms. I mean, I think this is a massive change, and massive change oftentimes has, now there's an executive summary on top of that, but there's all those other pieces. So when I look at this, a scale of this magnitude, if it's new, that's kind of where I'm coming from. Other people might go,
The rest of the board just
I-
have a hard
I-
time on that
I-
page.
This is the challenge of asking feedback from the board, because I'm about to give a
Yeah.
different response.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the zone of where I'm coming from. And again, yeah, and each one of us is one person, and we'll have a thing, and I think you've seen this, hopefully you have, I think we're very good about listening to a dialogue.
Put 5 numbers in a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're gonna mix and match. I like that. That's I like that. That's Sandy said.
You know, and I think, you know, I don't, I'm not at the 100 pages. But, you know, and I think my point about just talking about the considerations in greater detail and what's, it kind of helps us weigh the options, for sure. Because one of the options on here that you guys haven't had time to go into, I just want to say this because it could be
difficult to scope too early is the financial. Just if one is going to be much more than another, it doesn't have to be exactly down to the penny, but it helps with the scope to understand
But
that.
we're looking at that in the later start task force is coming up with costs.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, if one is, like I said, very different from the others in terms of financial implications, it's really helpful to know that. And also something that is touched on here, I would add one more consideration. Oh, I see it. It's just how tricky it is to implement. You know, with staff getting reassigned to buildings, you know, it sounds like it's all based off Springboard, so that's pretty easy, like.
For English,
English, right, yeah, so yeah, exactly. So that might be a consideration too, if it adds too much stress to staff, you know, this model, we've decided it's the Mercedes, but it's just it's a lot to do by 2017. Again, it kind of helps us scope in terms, and so that's the additional information I'm asking for, but I would not ask for 100 pages.
Did I hear you say that I heard Ken say that he wanted more than one, so.
I'm at this point, and if this doesn't work for you, I'm looking at your schedule too. It is helpful, and when we were going through full day kindergarten options, it was helpful for us to have 2 options and to weigh them against each other.
Okay.
And again, if you need us to be very specific with what kind of feedback, you know, once we get those options, what we do with them, I think that worked for us. I'm trying to think what else, other thoughts and consideration. I think that's, you know, and I guess, one more thing, and this kind of touches on what Kimberly and Ken said, is, again, what pain points, you know, how are we trying to move the system forward? Just kind of that global view of what, you know, I have my AMLE summary, you know, I've been trying to keep up to date with all that stuff, but it does kind of help to understand, since you guys have been doing this for so long, and you have, you know, I've read your mission statement, but still here, really, you know, how are you trying to move the system forward, and this is, and I think, although I'm asking for more than one option, I'm very open to you guys to rank them. I don't know what other board members think about that, but if you want to rank them, I'm happy to take that in. I think that's helpful information for sure.
Okay.
One thing I didn't see in here was 6th grade in one of these models that we're talking about, and 7th and 8th remaining challenge, where you could use 6th grade as kind of that springboard to be able to do what you're saying, try out new things, see where your giftings and skills. And I saw, when I went to your guys' middle school task force, I saw that as one of the options. So and I think that's the most similar to what we're doing now. And so I wouldn't mind seeing that. I definitely
6th grade, so 7th and 8th grade would remain challenge classes, 6th would be as we're doing now, 6th grade.
as we're doing now, but maybe you know, you're implementing more of these levels, like the springboard, the access points, and I heard you guys talk about that at that meeting, so that's why I bring that up.
Yeah, I think it was probably mentioned at some point during that day, so.
Yeah. And having, the differentiation is still a little bit fuzzy. Of course I understand differentiation, but it's still a little bit fuzzy of how you would group kids, and so I just think more specifics would be really helpful. And I know you gave a great example. Your example was really good, Lynn's. Yeah, I've heard you speak before, you're a good speaker. I know you guys did a great job, but. And
So, is there anything good?
and then more than one option for sure, because that puts the responsibility for making a choice on us. And then we're not taking a no vote if we have it to choose between. It just, I think it creates less, more cohesiveness probably.
And then it's done, rather than us saying
Two
no.
choices.
And then it
yeah,
goes
go
back.
and
If we have 2, you have to choose between the 2.
or, well, I'm not saying 2, I'm
Right,
saying
but
give
you
us
have to
options
choose
and
between
then,
those. Right.
yeah.
So I'd like to echo many things that have already been restated. I think they're good points. I like the idea of the list of considerations and kind of gridding these out with maybe 1, 2, or 3 with strong here, middle here, weak here for the 3 options that we looked at. I do also agree that I'd just as soon see that information for all 3 options that we looked at today I know we whittled it down to 3, but I think it'd be nice if it's not that much extra work to do all 3 and send that forward. I also like what Kimberly said about, you know, in Model 4, we've got 6, 7, 8, you know, adding challenge to 6th graders. And that would be a question that I have too, is this maybe an opportunity to say, now you're transitioning from elementary school to big kid school, multiple classes, multiple teachers, maybe that's enough in 6th grade? And that, why add that extra layer of development? I'm not sure what the advantage is if they're not currently doing it in 6th grade, or differentiating the education anyway. So I like that idea. And then the other, gosh, what am I here, pros and cons? Something, pros, oh, to Ken's point, I really like the fact that when we look at a change, we can envision what the advantages are and what we're trying to fix. But I do agree with that point that sometimes we miss what we're going to lose from going away from that or adopting this from where we are. So I really do like that. What are the pros of what we're accomplishing, but what are we trading off if we go in that direction? I think that'd be helpful. So thank you.
Okay, so trying to not give a completely different answer and build off of what has already been said. And Kimberly talked about, you know, how do we get kids to choose? I guess my question is, why aren't they? Have we looked into why are kids not choosing to take a challenge? Because I think that connects. Are they not choosing because they have too much on their plate? Well, then I think a model of heterogeneous classroom where they can opt as things or less busy or more busy helps them. Are they not choosing because it's a lack of communication or motivation or, you know, we've talked about, you know, part of our achievement gap is boys. They're not choosing the English and social studies, and why aren't they opting into that? Do they not see themselves as good at those skill sets? You know, we've heard anecdotally the National History Day is scaring kids off of challenge U.S. history. What that might be useful to know is that what's steering kids away from that. And then I will echo, Lynn, thank you so much for that visual. I had an 8th grader that was an AAP clustered. I keep thinking of another word for that. But, and his assistant principal sitting right behind me, and she's gonna laugh as I say this. I had nothing. So I had no idea what that looked like for him. So how is this different for you with me? Oh. So that was really and so that feeds into how are we going to communicate this to parents of what this looks like, because we're all struggling to visualize this, and this is our umpteenth study session on it. I, as a parent, had no idea what AAP looked like for him last year. And, I probably was a bad parent because I didn't pursue it more. But so how are we going to help parents visualize what this looks like, whatever we choose? I'll also echo the 6th grade concern. Every school visit we have been to at the secondary level talks about the increase in anxiety that they're seeing, mental health issues, and I'm very worried about putting this on the 11-year-old's plate of thinking about college and rigor, and I'm a little concerned about adding that. So I like the idea of, does this have to be, if we go with option 4, does it have to be 6th grade? And then, so since I was part of the creation of the challenge, I thought maybe, and we've been doing narrative history, that I would kind of talk through some of the thinking that went through, because some of the history we've gotten doesn't go all the way back. We had honors. It was 7th through 9th grade. Kind of the Wild West. There wasn't, some were great, some were whatever. And there was a decision not only by the board but administration that how we were testing kids wasn't really working. That kids were getting in that really wasn't the right place. We were missing kids, and so we stopped it for 1 year, and that was the decision. It was going to stop for 1 year. Please, those of you who were part of this, feel free to jump in. And retool how we were testing. And while we were having that conversation of redoing the testing, and we brought it back for 1 more year, that again, as a district as a whole, it wasn't just
the board that made this decision. It wasn't just community, it was everybody was saying, we're not really comfortable with it being an IQ component, that kids having access to pushing themselves being solely about IQ, that we really wanted it to open it up and encouraging more than just highly capable to be doing this. And that's partly how Challenge came about. It also was part of a larger community-wide conversation of, you know, we do high school incredibly well in this district. All you have to do is look at our 3 high schools and they're in every top whatever. They're just phenomenal, and we put a lot of attention into our elementary schools, and there was sort of this feeling at the time that junior high was the forgotten middle child, and so it was also part of this, do we do choice schools? How do we kind of keep them as part of this process and not of, oh my God, those are terrifying group of years of those group of kids. So I think that was also part of it. So I guess my point is, we're going to implement something that will look different, whatever it is. It will look somewhat different. And because when we did Challenge, it was just immediately after that we said, okay, we're going to move to a middle school model. So we knew the conversation was going to keep going about this age group. So how do we, whatever we choose, how will we monitor that? How will we evaluate? How do we keep middle school in our minds? And that it doesn't kind of fall back into the, oh my Lord, a smelly, stinky group of kids. And, you know, we can't get a state representative to come to one of those schools. They'll come to high schools, they'll come to elementary schools, but they look white, if you say. Come to one of our junior highs. So how do we keep them in the forefront of our minds?
Can I make another addition? I like what you say, and I like what you said, and it's good to have the historical background on it. I guess I'm really struggling with, if it's not broken, why are we completely shifting it? And can we partner in any way with the families that have we taken a survey of the parents and the students even? Because I know what you guys are saying, and you're on the ground as teachers, but I also am with a lot of teenagers because my husband coaches soccer, and I'm on the soccer field, and I'm with a lot of North Shore kids, and we hear different things. And so have we surveyed the students and surveyed the parents? I thought one of the things we were going to do was survey our community, since they were the ones that helped us to get Challenge in place. They're a very important part. I don't think that these are community members that are just about their own kids or themselves. I just don't. And I think they care very much for free reduced lunch and minority populations, and how do we close that gap. So, and I know I feel very much that way too. I have a passion for closing that gap, but do we just rip this apart? And it's the wrong terminology, but do we just, how do we know this isn't working well? Is it that we are actually have evaluated this program? Are we checking with students to see that they want this gone? And have we surveyed, weren't we going to send around a survey about this program?
We were originally, but then it's so complex, and there's so much context you have to explain when you're trying to talk about choices and options and programs, because not everybody has an understanding of look at how long it's taken just for you to try to visualize what the classroom looks like and the differentiation piece. So to try to explain that in any type of a survey and to get parent feedback could be challenging. Leanna and we could work through that if that was something the board needed.
I just feel like we said we were going to give them a voice, so it's allow them to at least give their feedback. So
there were certainly some more qualitative, open-ended questions in the recent survey that we did.
And I have it here. It's a lot of keep challenge. Out of the 1,000 comments, I read through almost all of them, and there's a good number of them. I didn't do a statistical analysis of it, but quite a few comments that was one of the biggest
Well,
concerns.
and something that's been tricky for me talking to folks, I think there is confusion, I was worried I was even picking it up tonight, about changing the general ed challenge structure versus curriculum. So are we And that's what I was trying to get, because the theory of action 1 versus 2 and 3, I was like, okay, so are we talking about what's considered the gen ed curriculum right now? Is that the baseline that we're moving with? Is it what we kind of consider the challenge right now? And so, and this, I think, just in communication in general, because I still have the questions too, are what, it's different, there's two questions, I'm playing with personally. You're talking about 2 different types of classrooms versus not, and also change of curriculum. Like what is that playing? Because I hear people say, we don't want to get rid of challenge, and to me, I'm hearing a curriculum question, not a class structure question sometimes. And so that would help, getting clarification of that would be very helpful.
The challenge is something that you're opting into, that's
Right.
moving at a faster pace. But I don't know whether the
But I think
curriculum.
some of these specifically said we will keep that faster pace. We just, everyone's in the same classroom.
I think
Which is, when that's why I was trying to understand the proposals.
for me, if you look at good one is algebra. No matter where a student takes algebra, it's the same algebra book. And it may be, so that's the curriculum. I mean, that text is the kind of foundation, and then you build off that. If it's a 8th grader taking it, may be able to go more in depth, may be able to do extension.
An example, language arts is the easiest one right now to tie to. Every single language arts student outside of my mid-level kids, so my lowest special ed kids, they're all working out of the exact same books. They're all working out of Springboard. When I talk to the teachers and say, where are you within your units? The LC special ed classes are a little bit back, but as far as the challenge and the regular right now, they really can't tell me, I may be 2 pages ahead or 2 pages behind, but that has to do with the teacher, then less than it has to do with what the Springboard curriculum is. The other part of curriculum, so one of the things, not to take us too far because I know we're all tired, but the other part of curriculum is Common Core state standards. All kids have this grade band of standards, 6 through 8, that they, or currently in our middle school configuration, 6 through 8, that they've got to meet. And so that defines where the kids are supposed to be. So when we talk about differentiation in a kind of a simplistic way to look at it, it's here's the standard the kid has to meet. As a teacher, I'm formatively assessing all my kids all the time. Are they meeting the standard? And when I see a kid that's not making the progress that they need to be making during a class period, I can very fluidly make that adjustment. And so the key to the differentiation is really assessing and knowing where the kid is. So I developed learning targets. So part of the curriculum is the textbook, part of the curriculum is the standards. And the standards are the same. It's 6 through 8, whatever. And for most of our classes, it's the same book. If you walk into the science classroom, it's the exact same science classroom, the same science book. If you walk into the language arts, it's Springboard. If you walk into a social studies classroom, what you're going to see in 8th grade social studies is different. Not now, but you would have seen in October and November as they're working on the National History Day project. Otherwise, it's the same books. It's the same. So when we're talking about those things, it's the same thing.
You see
really
you see a different book when you get into IB and AP, where there is a requirement that based on an AP at high school level, based on an AP course or an IB course, there's text that they highly recommend, or college and the high school that highly recommend that we purchase and utilize with students. So it's a little different than, let's say, for our challenge and our AP and our gen ed courses.
One thing we're still not talking about is peers and pace and feeling like they belong. And that's one key that maybe needs to be added is the kids need to have like-minded kids to be together, or they need to be able to discuss things with kids and feel like they fit in and what they're saying works. And we don't really discuss that in any of this. And parents expect that challenge curriculum, maybe the same curriculum, but it needs to be at a faster pace, not just 1 or 2 pages ahead of the gen ed, but a chapter ahead of the gen ed. And that's what parents' expectations are, and that's where some of the things that I'm hearing come from, that they expect this to be already happening. And if that's not, and maybe that's what the survey would show, is what parents are expecting out of challenge versus what's actually happening.
And that may presuppose a homogeneous grouping, which challenge classes are not. by any stretch of the
But
imagination.
again, that's a good thing, we don't know what their expectations are.
No, I don't, I know for myself as a board member, I don't presuppose
Yeah,
that.
but
Because I think kids
But
can
I
choose
think
it,
some
that's
parents
the.
might.
The idea that they'd be going faster, it may or may not work depending on their makeup.
Right, that's just
Now,
something.
you guys said one thing that I'm curious about is if I start challenge at the beginning of the year and I feel that it's not the right place for me, like let's say challenge English, I can't, because, for example, my son who's at a different school, he can choose, when he was in the middle of his and he goes, this is going too fast for me, he was able to go back to the other class. So why don't we allow for that option?
So try to be sensitive to where the kids' needs are, and so I'm not saying we don't make any of those changes, but if we made it that fluid, it would make master scheduling. So I build a master schedule that tries to optimize class sizes, and I'm going to begin doing that in April. When in November, if a bunch of kids are trying to bail out of or jump into challenge, suddenly I have to redo my master schedule. I have classes that are 40 and classes that are 20, and the teachers are teaching right next to each other. So there's some level, if it's that massive a change. We do have some students, in particular when Sandy's talking about anxiety, we have some kids that are like, I can't handle this, I'm losing my mind. And so on a case-by-case basis, we're going to make that, but as a policy, like just come in and go as you please, that's a much different piece.
I have, if you go back to slides 5 and 6,
5 and 6, oh boy, okay. Let's see.
the one that says timeline is 5.
8:52.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
there we go, all right.
So, I'm concerned that this timeline gives the board and the community, I'm starting at a better picture. I mean, a much better picture. I'm getting to the point where I may be able to make certain decisions and feel like I can defend those decisions.
But you need 100 pages.
Well, but there's a reason, the word OB used was unpack. So I think a lot of the things that are the questions, unpacking them, and that doesn't need to be a dense doctoral thesis, but unpack some of these concerns that we've heard, and to unpack those in maybe 1 to 3 pagers of here's this concern, almost an FAQ. This is a concern that's heard, here's how option 1, 2, or 3 unpacks it. They may be unpack them differently, or they not, and I think that to get to a recommendation that both the community and the board can support. Because I don't think we have the support I don't think it's been communicated, knowledgeable, I'm trying to think the right word, and educated, there's a better word for it, but people just don't understand what it is that's being talked about. And it takes some time to get that out there, and here's what it looks like, and then the decision. And so I find this timeline to be impossible, I guess, in order to get a community that can understand and accept the decision, given where the community has been at. Now, I've learned a lot tonight, okay? And like I said, I'm getting closer to the point where I can make certain decisions about certain things, and I think I understand better why we're at where we're at. I don't know how we get it really clear and get the community to at least understand. They don't have to agree. It's not always about agreeing, but it's about listening. You can't always accommodate, but I want to make sure that you're heard. And I'm not sure that we can get to that on this timeline, so I don't know where the board is at on that.
Well, and do I read this correctly, that final recommendation to the board is kind of a first reading, for lack of a better term, like it would be, or it would be presented in a study session, but that's not the day we're voting.
I don't know, that's just the date that we felt we would be ready to, that the task force, we would have gone to the task force, and then it would just be forwarded on to the board.
This is on the end of June, that's right.
Yeah.
So it would be dependent if you want one reading, 2 readings, what you need at that point, so.
So maybe to build up what you're saying is that the final recommendation to the board date is not terrible, but it's then the communication to the community of.
Right, and the
where
5 of us,
that's
do we think we'll be at the point where we can really wrestle with and make a decision that's responsive to the enormous amount of work that's been done in building up on and trying to address this issue. That's a really important part. I love the history that you shared. That helped me to put together some other things. So I find this to be a timeline that I'm very concerned to be responsive to our community. And that they're gonna be comfortable with the decision that the board's gonna make. And that's where the communication pieces, visualizing it, showing me, showing others, those classroom experiences, I think is gonna be really helpful. That's gonna get me to be able to be there, and I can direct people to that, but I don't have it yet. The other piece was, if I can, the next slide. And we heard a little bit about this, that there was this meeting, and then I don't know what happened at that meeting. I don't know the outcome of that meeting. I know we have people here who were in that meeting, and I don't know from the board's edification, I don't know if any of the board knows what was
I wish we would have
going.
been invited to that meeting.
Well, I'm not gonna, I just wanna know what happened there and when is the appropriate time for us to hear about that. Because if there was a thoughtful kind of sharing, what happened? And I hadn't heard that yet, and I would like to, in the appropriate time and place, to hear that. And if it's not now, if it's 2 weeks from now or months from now, then I'm not, maybe not be able to ready to make a decision at the time. So, I don't know, I'll defer to the chair,
No,
the president.
but I think that's a very good point, because I feel like some of the voices aren't at this table. And I don't mean, specific, I would like, the NSD's voice, I'd like the Save Our Challenge voices as part of this discussion and hear what their perspectives are of these 3 plans. And I have asked for that on many
Well,
occasions,
right.
and it hasn't happened, and I feel like we're missing it. I feel like we're missing a huge piece of our community that's vitally important on both sides. And that's not your guys' fault, that
Well,
partly is.
just point of, Chair's prerogative, point of clarification is the task force needed feedback from us. So
Okay,
that was the
fair.
purpose of
That was
the
the
meeting,
purpose
was
of
that
the
similar
Are
to
we
the
on
Start
the
Time
right
Task
track?
Force and everything, so we could provide feedback and help them as they finish.
And I appreciate it.
Yeah, and the
But-
subcommittee is comprised of parents, NSEA members, district staff. So that was how it was
Does that have-
created and crafted, as the middle school task force is created that way as well from the school board of what does the composition of the task force look like.
I just would, maybe this isn't the appropriate time, but I would like to have those voices at the table so I can hear from your guys' employer lead and the Save Our Challenge. And I just feel like we're missing, I hear you, I know that there are parents on here, but I think we have a very strong community group, and we're going to really create some upheaval.
Well, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, that schedule that you presented is the task force's tasks, for lack of a better term, since my brain is sleepy. So, this is not the process entirely, right? I mean, we're talking into June, we have, as a board, after the task force has completed what they have identified as their tasks, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but after they're done the work that they set out to do, then it's a question to look at here and talk about what the board needs in order to do first, second, whatever reading, what kind of structures do we need in order to get us to the point where we're ready to move. It's a very legitimate question. But I don't think that this was a subset of the full schedule of this entire process.
The outcome was just for tonight, and was that they've been working hard, and so we really needed to do a check-in to figure out where are we at and what is missing, what needs to be included, what doesn't, where do we go from here. So that was the purpose of tonight, is to try to interact with the board, probe and ask questions. They've been working hard, and they're probably ready to be done and go home. And they have to teach tomorrow, we all have to work, and so they're probably ready to move forward. And so you've given us some ideas and things, so Gretchen and I will have to flesh out and work through that and see what do we ask the
Feel
subcommittee
like
to
you've
do.
gotten what you were here for?
Yeah, we've got.
Is there any big gap that you think is still out there that you just weigh in?
No, I guess the one thing that Amy, you would need to probe is that I I hear what Kim's saying about the voices are missing at the table. I don't feel that's my authority to determine what voices are missing at the table and how to involve them. I did bring them together last week and we met,
Which was awesome.
but I'm